There is a list, 6 items, and whether the used car you're driving right now or the one you're about to buy makes it to 200,000 miles or falls apart at 87,000 comes down almost entirely to whether those 6 things were done, not 12 items, not a full service menu, 6. That's the whole game. I know because I spent 15 years on the other side of this. Wholesale auction buyer. I walked through thousands of used vehicles, not to buy one for myself, but to understand why that car was there, why the previous owner got rid of it, why it was now someone else's problem. 9 times out of 10, the answer wasn't a blown engine or a bad transmission from the factory. The answer was a maintenance history that stopped too early, or never started. The shops know this list. The quick lube chains know it. The manufacturers know it. They wrote it into owners' manuals in language flat enough that most people close the book before they finish the first section. And the dealers on the lot know it too, because a car with bad maintenance history gets sent to auction. That's where I was standing when I bought it. What I'm about to give you is the exact checklist I used on every car I evaluated. Not the 15-item upsell sheet the shop slides across the counter when you're waiting for your oil change. 6 things. That's it. Everything else is optional. Some of it is theatre. Pay close attention to number 4. I'm going to tell you a story attached to that one, because the number, the cost, the statistic, doesn't do it justice. The story does. Item 1. Engine oil, but not on the schedule the sticker tells you. A woman I knew at the auction brought in a 2014 Honda Accord with 94,000 miles. Clean body, clean interior, ran when she got it, stopped running about 3 months later, seized engine, scored cylinder walls, $6,200 in damage on a car she paid $9,000 for. The cause wasn't a defect, it was sludge. Conventional oil, changed every 5,000 miles when the manufacturer called for synthetic every 7,500 to 10,000. Running in Texas heat on stop-and-go highway every single day. The oil broke down. The sludge built up. The engine starved slowly for months before it announced itself. The quick lube industry built its entire business on the 3,000-mile oil change. That interval was accurate for carbureted engines built before the late 1990s on conventional oil in moderate driving conditioning. It has not been accurate for most vehicles on the road for 25 years. The industry kept the number anyway, because 3,000 miles means more visits. More visits mean more revenue. And the math is simple enough that someone in a boardroom decided the sticker stays. Modern full synthetic oil holds its protective properties for 7,500 to 10,000 miles under normal driving. Some manufacturer specifications go to 15,000. Your owner's manual has the real number, not the windshield sticker, not the service advisor's recommendation while he's watching his commission screen. The manual. If you own a 2010 or newer vehicle and you're changing oil every 3,000 miles on quick lube advice, you're spending roughly double what you need to spend. And you may still be using the wrong oil type for your engine architecture. Check the manual. Use what it says. Change it when it says. Everything else is a sticker. Item 2. Coolant, the one that fails slowly, then all at once. Engine coolant, anti-freeze, does 2 jobs most people know about. It prevents freezing in winter and prevents overheating in summer by moving heat from the engine block to the radiator. What almost no one knows is that coolant also contains corrosion inhibitors. Chemical compounds whose job is to protect the aluminum and steel in your cooling system from oxidizing, from pitting, from quietly eating themselves from the inside. Those inhibitors have a service life. When they're gone, the coolant turns mildly acidic. Mildly acidic coolant attacks aluminum, your water pump impeller, your radiator fins, your heater core, the coolant passages cast into your engine block. The first sign is a brownish tint in the overflow reservoir. The last sign, if you miss the first one, is a head gasket failure. A head gasket seals the combustion chamber from the coolant passages. When acidic coolant runs hot, even slightly hot, not dramatically overheating, the gasket swells and contracts unevenly over hundreds of heat cycles. Eventually, it cracks. When it does, coolant enters the combustion chamber and burns white, or oil enters the coolant passages and turns the reservoir the colour of a chocolate milkshake. Either way, the repair on a 4-cylinder engine runs $1,200 to $2,000. On a V6, more. A coolant flush costs $80 to $150 at an independent shop and should happen every 5 years or 100,000 miles. The vehicle history report on a used car will not tell you when coolant was last flushed. It almost never does. A mechanic with a chemical test strip will tell you in 90 seconds during a pre-purchase inspection. That 90 seconds is worth the cost of the appointment. Item 3. Transmission fluid, the lifetime fluid that isn't. Ask 10 people when they last changed their transmission fluid. 8 won't know. 2 will tell you they've never thought about it. Multiply that across every used car on the road in this country, and you have a direct explanation for why transmission failure is one of the most expensive repair bills a used car owner faces. The phrase lifetime fluid was introduced by manufacturers to describe factory-filled transmission fluid that would outlast the powertrain warranty. Not the transmission, the warranty. Someone made a decision that the language was close enough to say one and mean the other, and it stuck. An automatic transmission operates dozens of clutch packs, bands, solenoids, and a torque converter, all bathed in a fluid that cools them, lubricates them, and transmits hydraulic pressure for every gear change. That fluid oxidizes. It absorbs water vapor. The friction modifiers that protect clutch surfaces break down chemically, and when they're gone, those clutch packs drag against each other on degraded protection at every single shift, every single day. Change it every 30,000 to 60,000 miles, tighter if you tow or drive in extreme heat. The drain and fill costs $100 to $250 at an independent shop. A transmission rebuild costs $2,500 to $5,000. A replacement, depending on the vehicle, can exceed that. Nobody who has paid for a transmission rebuild ever thought the fluid change was too expensive. Item 4. Brake fluid. And the story I told you I'd tell. A man in Georgia, 2019, late spring, was driving a used Jeep Grand Cherokee he'd owned for about 8 months. He was descending a long grade on a 2-lane highway, a hill he drove every week. He braked at the top out of habit. He braked again in the middle. By the bottom, the pedal was soft. By the last curve, it was going to the floor. He went off the road into a guardrail at about 35 miles per hour. He walked away. The Jeep didn't. The investigating mechanic found brake fluid with a moisture content so high its boiling point had dropped below what the system was generating during repeated braking. The fluid vaporized inside the brake lines. Vapor doesn't compress. When vapor is in the lines instead of fluid, the pedal produces nothing. This is not a freak mechanical failure. Brake fluid is hygroscopic. It pulls moisture out of the air through the rubber seals and hoses in the braking system. Fresh .3 fluid boils at 401 degrees Fahrenheit. After 2 years of normal moisture absorption in a typical vehicle, that number can drop to 284 degrees or below. The NHTSA has documented brake fade from moisture-saturated fluid as a contributing factor in accidents. Not theoretical, documented, in real crashes involving real vehicles. A brake fluid flush costs $70 to $100 at any qualified shop. Most manufacturers recommend it every 2 years or 30,000 miles. Almost nobody does it. When you pull service records on a used car and brake fluid isn't listed, and it almost never is, that fluid has likely never been changed. The car you are looking at right now may have moisture-saturated fluid in the system. Add it to your negotiation. Make it your first service appointment. It is the cheapest safety item on this list by a significant margin, and the only one that can kill you. Before I give you the last two items, and one of them has a failure mode that most people have never considered, I want to say something about how this works. The industry doesn't hide this information with a document or a classified filing. It hides it with noise. 15-item service menus, stickers on your windshield, phrases like lifetime fluid, that technically mean something different than what they sound like. The way they keep you from knowing the list isn't suppression, it's distraction. And the distraction works because nobody ever sits down and says 6 things. That's the whole list. Write them down. You now have 4. Write them down. Item 5. The serpentine belt, the one that takes everything with it. One belt, one rubber belt runs the alternator, the power steering pump, the air conditioning compressor, and in many engines, the water pump. All of them. One belt. When it snaps, and it doesn't warn you before it does, the alternator stops charging the battery, the power steering goes heavy, and if the water pump was belt-driven, the engine stops circulating coolant. A modern engine without coolant circulation will begin to overheat in minutes. At highway speed, that overheat, if it goes far enough, warps the cylinder head. A warped head means resurfacing or replacement, a repair that can run $2,500 to $3,000 on top of whatever the belt and water pump cost. The belt itself is $30 to $80 at any auto parts store. The labour to install it runs $60 to $120 at an independent shop. Under $200 total, usually less. The tow, the water pump, the head resurfacing. That's a different number. Here's the problem. Modern serpentine belts are made from EPDM rubber, which doesn't crack visibly the way older neoprene belts did. A belt that looks nearly new to the naked eye can be within a few thousand miles of failure. The degradation happens inside the material before it shows on the surface. The only reliable checks are a groove depth wear gauge, available for about $8 at any auto parts store, or following the manufacturer's interval, which is typically every 60,000 to 100,000 miles. On a used car, where nobody knows the belt's history, budget it into your first service visit. $200 of prevention, not several thousand in consequence. Item 6. Air filters, engine and cabin, and the one that's quietly destroying your engine. This is the one I want to spend a moment on, because most people think of air filters as a minor item. One of them is. One of them is not. The engine air filter keeps abrasive particulate matter, dirt, dust, debris, out of the combustion chamber. A clogged filter restricts airflow, forces the fuel management system to compensate with a richer fuel mixture and reduces fuel economy. That part most people know. What most people don't know is what happens specifically on direct injection engines, which describes the majority of vehicles sold in the past 10 years. On a port-injected engine, fuel sprays across the intake valves before entering the cylinder. That fuel wash keeps the back of the valves clean. On a direct injection engine, fuel sprays directly into the cylinder, bypassing the valves entirely. There is no wash. Carbon from combustion blow-by accumulates on the back of the intake valves over time, and a restricted air filter accelerates that process by worsening combustion efficiency. Carbon buildup on DI intake valves is a real service issue. Walnut blasting, the procedure shops use to remove it, runs $300 to $600 on most engines. It's entirely preventable with clean filters and the right fuel. An engine air filter is $15 to $30. Change it every 15,000 hours to 30,000 miles, more often in dusty conditions. It takes 5 minutes and no tools on most vehicles. The cabin air filter doesn't protect the engine. It protects you. It filters every cubic foot of air moving through your heating and air conditioning system before it reaches the passenger compartment. A clogged cabin filter moves less air, forces the blower motor to work harder, and passes more particulate matter into the cabin. It also, on a used car, tells you something about the previous owner. A filter black with debris and mould tells you that person did not maintain this car. A clean one tells you the opposite. 2 pieces of evidence, $15 to $30 each. Change both. They're the cheapest items on this list and the fastest indicators of how a car was treated before you bought it. 6 items: oil, coolant, transmission fluid, brake fluid, the serpentine belt, 2 filters. The total cost to service every single one of these on a used vehicle that hasn't had any of them done, at an independent shop, not a dealer, runs somewhere between $500 and $900. That is not a repair bill. That is a maintenance bill. The difference is the difference between what you pay to keep a car running and what you pay when it stops. A repair bill is what a maintenance bill looks like after you ignored it for 3 years. Everything covered here, the service intervals, the failure costs, the exact checks you can run before you buy any used vehicle, is compiled in the dealer vault, along with the full pre-purchase inspection checklist I used during 15 years at the auction. One document. Link is in the description. Use it before your next purchase. Here's what happens when you know this list. Really know it. Not as a general idea, but as a specific sequence of checks you can run in a dealer's parking lot before you ever sit down to negotiate. You open the hood. You look at the serpentine belt. You know what degradation looks like now. You pull the dipstick and check the oil colour. Dark brown means it's been sitting. Black sludge means it's been neglected. You ask the sales manager for the service records and you scan them in 30 seconds. Not for engine rebuilds or major repairs, but for the small items. The coolant flush, the brake fluid change, the transmission service, because the small items are where previous owners either paid attention or didn't. And the ones who didn't, their cars are the ones with hidden problems that won't announce themselves until 60 days after you drive off the lot. The sales manager has spent his career reading buyers. He knows what an unprepared buyer looks like. He knows the signs: hesitation, questions that don't go anywhere, a focus on monthly payment instead of total cost. When he sees someone opening the hood, checking fluid condition, asking for service records by fluid type, he reads something different. He doesn't know exactly what you know. He just knows it's more than he expected. And that shift in the room, from browser to inspector, is worth real money at the negotiating table. You are no longer the easiest sale on the lot. You are the most prepared buyer that manager has seen all week, possibly all month. And prepared buyers don't get taken. Most people who watch something like this take the information and keep it. That's a reasonable thing to do. But think for a second about who in your life is about to sit down across from a sales manager without this. A family member, a friend, someone who mentioned last week they're shopping this weekend. They're going in with whatever they currently know, which is probably what the dealer's marketing already told them. A share costs you nothing. What it prevents for someone else is real. Subscribe if you want more of this. The next video covers what the finance office does in the last 20 minutes of your deal, quietly, while you're tired and ready to sign, that costs the average buyer under $200 in the first year of ownership. That one is worth seeing before you're sitting in that chair. Everything shared here is general consumer information. Always have a qualified mechanic perform a full pre-purchase inspection before buying any used vehicle.